If you're just now joining us, we're going to get started in just a moment. Thank you all so much. All right, so it's 6 o'clock on the dot. We have a really tight schedule tonight, so thank you all so much for being here. I think we're going to go ahead and kick things off. My name's Lauren James. I'm the manager of member engagement here at the Nasher Sculpture Center, and thank you all so much for joining us. The Nasher is a member-supported organization. Tonight's webinar is being recorded, and once it's uploaded to YouTube, we'll share it with everyone who is joining us tonight. Really quickly, we are going to have time for questions at the very end of the discussion after everyone's had a chance to talk about their work and things going on in the world. If you have any questions, send them in the chat and we will get to them at the very end. So I'm gonna hand it over to the director of the Nasher Sculpture Center, Jeremy Strick, to make introductions.
Great, Lauren, thanks so much, and welcome everyone watching online. Thank you for joining us and being a part of this, and a very special thanks to the artists who are participating this evening. It means a huge amount to have you do this with us. And I just have to say that I think I'm as excited about this program as anyone. Normally, when we do project or a show with an artist, the artist is on site for days, if not weeks. And so all of our staff, we have ample opportunity to interact with the artist and hear their ideas and thoughts about their work. This Windows project, for many obvious reasons, is quite different. So I, like many of you watching, in many instances, my first opportunity to have a personal encounter with the artist. So thank you. The Windows program really came out of two conversations that began to develop after the Nasher closed its doors because of COVID-19 in mid-March. One of those conversations had to do, well, we had, like many museums, we had turned to digital programming because people couldn't access us physically. And this evening's program is one manifestation of that enhanced digital effort. But as a museum of sculpture, we're still concerned with objects in space, and didn't want to give up on the physical, and kept asking ourselves, is there something we can do in the physical realm? What can we do even while closed? The second conversation had to do with, what can we do to support the community of artists in and around Dallas. That community is incredibly important to us. It's a major audience for us. Many of our most significant conversations come out of conversations with artists. And artists, of course, have been particularly hard hit by at least the economic effects of the pandemic, if not more. So really want to think about ways we could support that community. We were able, for example, to double our Nasher artist grants, the amount of money provided this year. We were delighted with that, thanks to some generous sponsors. Those two conversations came together when our associate curator, Lee Arnold, had the idea of presenting works in the windows of the Nasher. I think she was partly inspired by the fact that the Nasher is unusual among museums, in that we're set at street level. We're not set back. We're not set high up on a plinth or a pedestal, or behind a long access road or driveway. We're right there on the street, and the galleries are visible from the street. And so she said, could we show work by artists and artists in this community in our windows? Everyone was really excited by that idea. And we thought, well, we have, in addition, a space right in our entry vestibule that is that it doesn't even have trees in front of us, is completely visible from the street, and is also a distinct space. It's defined, it has its own character, and could provide an opportunity for artists to explore. And so those two ideas came together. We figured we could present work. We could, by doing shows rapidly, one a week, we could impact more artists than if we were just to do a typical show of a show taking 12 weeks or so. So our curators set out to identify artists and come up with a program. This is all done very, very rapidly. Normally exhibitions are processes that take a year to 3, even 8 years. But we had to do things differently, and everyone from on our team was able to work within those constraints, and most of all, the artists. So I'm just grateful for the effort everyone put into this. I've been really thrilled with the work the artists have presented. I think each one has been remarkable, and I've thoroughly enjoyed and been enlightened in all kinds of ways by the work that they've made available. So again, I want to thank and congratulate the artists and turn this over to our curator, Lee Arnold.
Thanks, Jeremy, for that amazing introduction. Thank you to all the artists for participating tonight. It's so crucial to have you here. And thanks to our members for joining, and Lauren for organizing. I'm going to quickly get us through some introductions for everybody on the panel tonight, so we can get to the real meat of this panel discussion, which is the conversation that will take place as soon as I introduce everybody. So Lauren's going to follow along with me in the PowerPoint, and we're going to show you, an image of the artist with their installation, and I'll give you some background on each artist who's participating in the Nasher Windows series. We started the series with Tamara Johnson, May 22nd. Feels like a lifetime ago. Her sculpture, Deviled Egg and Oprah Column, was on view for the week, May 22nd through May 27th. Tamara Johnson works primarily in sculpture, installation, performance, and public art. She obtained her BFA from the University of Texas at Austin in 2007, and her MFA in sculpture from the Rhode Island School of Design in 2012. In October 2018, Johnson and her partner, Trey Burns, opened Sweet Pass Sculpture Park, an art space in West Dallas, featuring contemporary outdoor projects on a rotating basis. Next up in this series was artist Xavier Edward Carter with his installation, Start Living in a New World. That installation ran May 29th through June 10th, and Xavier Carter has exhibited throughout Vietnam, South Korea, Spain, Mexico, and France. In 2011, he was awarded the Arch and Ann Giles Kimbrough Fund from the Dallas Museum of Art and participated in Yellow Submarine No. 2 residency. Carter was a fellow for the 2016-2017 Yerba Buena Center for the Arts Project Inquiry, Can We Design Freedom? In 2019, Carter was awarded a postgraduate Dijon Dallas Exchange Fellowship. Artist Vince Jones is unable to join us this evening, but I know he's probably here in spirit as we consider his installation among the Nasher Windows series. His installation titled Ghost Trap was on view June 12th through June 17th. Leslie Martinez was our installation on view June 19th through June 24th, titled Monarchs on the Hoop. Leslie Martinez is a multidisciplinary artist born in the Rio Grande Valley of the South Texas Mexican border and raised in Dallas, Texas. They received an MFA from the Yale School of Art in New Haven, Connecticut in 2018, and a BFA from the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art in New York City in 2008. Martinez will open their solo exhibition at Now Gallery in Dallas this Saturday, July 11th, so keep an eye out for that. Up next was Tiara Fiery. It's an artist project-based collaboration comprising artists Annalise Minhares and Sarita Westrop with their sculpture titled Orbital Migration 3000. Their project came down from view. It was on view June 26th through July 1st. And Tiara Fiery is the project-based collaboration of Annalise Minhares and Sarita Westrup, and speaks to their identity as women born and raised on the border of Texas and Mexico. Their installations explore issues of duality, authenticity, cultural geography, and migration. Both artists also pursue individual artist practices grounded in fibers and sculpture. An interdisciplinary artist and arts educator from El Paso, Minhares received her BFA in fibers from the University of North Texas in 2013 and is currently an MFA candidate at Southern Methodist University. Westrup lives and works in Pendleton, North Carolina, but her personal textile and sculptural projects are inspired by the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, where she was born and raised. She received her MFA in fibers from the University of North Texas in 2016. Kristen Cochran's installation is our current install on view. It debuted at the Nasher July 3rd, and it's been recently announced that the installation has been extended through July 15th. Kristen Cochran is an interdisciplinary artist living and working in Dallas. Originally from Portland, Oregon, she moved to Dallas in 2010 to complete her MFA at Southern Methodist University. Cochran's recent work explores the pleasures, absurdities, and banalities of daily labor and its symbolic implications. Her transdisciplinary work encompasses and often shifts among sculpture, drawing, video, and installation, and is often comprised of quotidian materials such as bread, clay, clothing, shirt, pockets, neon signage, and copper plumbing, materials used as they relate to the gestures, needs, and aspirations of human beings at work. And last but certainly not least, Weijiang, whose work is yet to be titled, though I'm sure we'll hear from him this evening. You can see his work in the background of his image tonight, but also on the screen. Originally from Guangzhou, Weijiang, China, Weijiang came to North Texas in 2011 to study art at UNT. He currently lives and works in North Texas. Zhang's current work is based on his personal experience of immigration and familial relationships, both here in the US and in China. For his upcoming Nasher Windows installation, Zhang will focus on the suitcase as a symbol of identity, as a container of self, and the vehicle of transformation. The image of stacked luggage evokes fleeing refugees, college kids moving away from home, or all of us simply piling our histories and burdens together. This image is particularly poignant in the midst of the global pandemic, which has impacted travel and restricted movement all over the world. Those are all of my introductions for this evening. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Jed Morse, who will kind of kick off the conversation with the first question to all the artists.
Thanks, Lee. So, this, in difficult times, we have to come up with new ways to keep going, to keep moving. And, this was an unusual format that you all had to deal with. The vestibule is a space that's usually transitional. You pass through the vestibule while you're going from outside to inside the Nasher Sculpture Center. It's essentially a glass box. So, I'm curious, how did you approach this unusual format for the project, especially considering that, this is, you're making objects that are three-dimensional and are usually meant to be experienced by the viewer in the space. Let's see, why don't we go ahead and start off with Tamara, since Tamara, you started off the whole thing.
Okay. Good question. I think originally when Lee had approached me to do this project, I was super excited, and my brain was going a million miles a minute. I had like 8,000 ideas that I wanted to do. I was thinking about just the museum itself being kind of condensed into like the front vestibule space, like a French press, So, and I was thinking a lot about Oldenburg storefront from the 60s. And, I had been working on some pieces that were set to be in a show that was going to happen in April that got postponed. So I had some pieces that recent pieces that were about 85, 90% finished. And I just picked my favorite one, and Lee also picked what was my favorite one, and it was, this long column. But, I was thinking a lot about this idea of, interiors and exteriors, the space in the museum that isn't really considered most often, but now is kind of the only space to be considered. And thinking about who has access to these spaces, who gets to go inside of this space, who has to stay on the other side of the glass, and like what that means, where the vulnerabilities are, where's the comfort level when someone gets to be inside versus having to remain outside. And I think about those two dichotomies in my work a lot, and the different echoes of what happens to the people who get to be inside and the people who have to be outside. So I was super excited, and it was the first time I got to see my little okras and deviled eggs penetrating each other in a long, it's about 16 and a half feet tall. So it kind of just gelled all those ideas that I was thinking about already, and this condensation of the museum into this really small kind of front space.
That's great. Thanks, Tamara.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier, how about you? How did you deal with that strange, unusual situation?
Well, at least for me, it's as much as considering the fishbowl in a world like that. Though we can't access immediately our want to be in that kind of space, we can imagine what's on the other side of the glass in that way. And there's still depth inside of viewing something and understanding that, this is a three-dimensional space as much as any other space. So I just approached it that way, with the hanging structure, and then the small pieces on the ground as well. Yeah, pretty simple for me.
That's great. Thank you. Leslie, your piece, really kind of obviated the space in a way, because it pressed tightly up against the glass. I'm curious how you thought about the space for your project.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because one of the last sort of projects that I did in grad school for my final review was sort of dealt with that idea of something that you can sort of see but you can't touch. And so approaching this project from the perspective of a painter, I don't consider myself sculptural in any way or in the round, was kind of challenging, because this piece itself was intended for a different show that was affected by COVID-19. It was for a group exhibition at the Phoenix Art Museum that ended up out of left field being completely canceled just months before its installation. So I started the project during a residency at Booker T, an alumni residency. And one day I showed up and they were like, pack your bags, it's over. So the project itself sort of at its essence and its final appearance is rooted in adaptation. And so I thought of the use of this space as even being an adaptation to the fact that I couldn't finish the project the way that it was intended. I couldn't exhibit the project in the exhibition space that it was intended for, and I couldn't exhibit the project in the way that it was intended, meaning since it's painting based, it's sort of up against a wall. So it's the opposite. So I was thinking I can do it with suction cups, and then that was just a huge risk because it'll just fall off. I tried another thought with stickers, some kind of sticker and string, and then I eventually landed at wires. But sort of that idea of sort of suspension is something that's integral to my work, but just the idea of liminal space or transformational space, transitional space is something that I do think about quite often. So it lent itself, but then there was also other forms that you adapt to, such as the window shade, and that, you know, forced me to have to like move it upwards. So it's like almost everything is like me being sort of a buoy on the water and just kind of going with it. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Leslie. Annalise and Sarita. Actually, Sarita, you know, you're not currently in Dallas, but you may know the space, and Annalise, you may have had to help talk Sarita through it a little bit while you were discussing. I'm curious what those discussions about the space might have entailed.
Well, I think when we first started off, and Catherine Kraft reached out to Annalise and to us, and we were excited for the opportunity. And we know the space very well. We're big Nasher enthusiasts. And we wanted to take it as an opportunity to make something new, but with the COVID restrictions and with me being in North Carolina and Annalise being in Dallas, we tried to problem solve, like, what if I created something here and I mailed it to her, and then she took it into another direction, and then therefore it could be ready to show. And so that was a really interesting conversation that we had. And with so many restrictions on like thinking about mail and just risk, we decided to show a piece that we've made in the past, adapted into a new modular formation, and it's a piece that really strongly represents Tiara Fiery's work. Annalise, what do you have to add?
I think the vestibule is an interesting place to show because the typical experience with the Nasher is that you have this moment of the passage in the vestibule to ready yourself to look at artwork. So you're like opening the door, you're in the vestibule, you open that second door, and then you're like in the museum. And you're in this headspace, you kind of transform into this headspace to look at work. The Nasher Windows series, you're just kind of like confronted by the work right away off the street. So I found that to be very interesting experience, but as far as, you know, there's still that window between you and the sculpture. And so you're only getting this like perspective from the front of the piece, and you can shift to the left, shift to the right, but you're only getting this, this head-on experience with artwork.
Yeah, I noticed when you were installing, you know, you were constantly going outside and seeing, you know, seeing how it looked from outside, and then coming back in and making slight adjustments, and you know, playing with that kind of sense of having a three-dimensional space reduced to a two-dimensional plane. But it looks fantastic. It was really wonderful. And let's see, Kristen, you know the space so well, but I mean, how often are you asked to install in a transitional space?
Okay, so this is funny, and I didn't remember this until we've all been here talking about transitional spaces. I don't know if anyone else remembers this, but I've had the opportunity. I actually have I have a history of showing work in transitional spaces. I like took over the hallway when Central Track residency happened, which I had forgotten about. Yeah, and that was very much a full immersion experience. And then Lucia Simic and I were jammed into the Threshold liminal space at the Dallas Contemporary, which they called Gallery 2, which I think is hilarious to this day. But so that's just a little bit of a side note that I hadn't remembered until getting on this conversation with you all. But yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with this space, but in a way that I haven't really considered that much. I think that I think it was Annalise that was talking about it in a way that really resonates in that it's a less than conscious sort of space. It's like a yeah, it's that threshold space. So you want me to talk a bit about how I conceived the work for the space? Is Jed around? I think that's what I'm supposed to do.
I'm nodding, but apparently you can't see me.
Yeah,
Yes,
sorry, I
please.
can't
That'd be
give you-
great.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about, I guess like Tamara, and maybe everybody, I got really excited about proposing a work for the space, and you know, went in all these different directions, and some of them were more maybe related to sculpture in a more traditional sense, so that, you know, it's like object within contained space. But in all of the propositions, it was sort of dependent on the space, because I think about architecture and the relationship between the viewer and the space that they're in quite a bit. And when this work was chosen, I still vacillated between the original proposal, which is pretty much, you know, was this script, you know, sort of tagging the front facade of the building up high and central. This is the way it ended up being installed. But I did consider, like, what happens if this neon that is flat, that's text, that I think of as a flat thing, what if I could, you know, install it in space so that it might be experienced in the round by, I think about Mario Mertz, who uses, you know, that argon gas line in such a beautiful way in like a three-dimensional sculptural sense. And so I kind of, you know, easily got sort of like, would fall in love with a million different ideas, and curatorial knows, like, you know, it's like, let's get it. I don't know. I just feel like I thought about the work existing in space in a more traditional sense, but this felt important to reference signage. And also with this idea that the museum's closed, I wanted the work to function in a way that was democratic and accessible. And that's what signs do. You know, they're for everyone on the street. They are sort of a beacon, and they invite the viewer in by flashing or glowing. And that volume of light extends from inside to outside. And so I guess what I was hoping was that by situating the work up high, and having it, you know, the light transcend the glass tube into the space, it could function from a distance. And then if you get up close, what I didn't know is how wonderful all of the light play would be within that vestibule itself. I knew that the glass reflectivity would function in some way that I couldn't really know, but if you get up close, I guess the hope was that you be immersed in the light, that the viewer is immersed in the light, and then it becomes more of an embodied experience. So yeah, I think I wanted it on the outside of the building at first as sort of this to shift the relationship, like to have this large scale text and the architecture of the space become the armature, right? So it would be surface, but armature, and the work would have to be sort of, you know, supported by it. And that didn't happen, but yeah, I don't know. I can talk too long, so I'll just pause there.
That's all right. That's great. Thanks, Kristen. And the idea of the architecture as armature, I think, might have played into Long Hui's thinking about the space as well. Long Hui, you want to talk about how you approach the space conceptually?
Sure. Yeah. First, when I got the invitation request from Lee, I was thinking like using a luggage as a freestanding, and then just have them freestanding on the floor. And then after getting some recommendation from Lee, like, you know, get some feedback from her, and then, you know, we wanted to do something more with a window glass, since it's more like a window display series. So I think the final proposal that I have so far here, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way it's like kind of having all the luggage pile up and then against the window, and there's a translucent window people can see through. And normally the way I have all those like about 45 to 50 luggage, and then I have them like display in a different location, different gallery, with a different space, but sometimes they're having like pile up on a corner of a room, and sometimes they have them pile up on a wall, against a wall. But this time is kind of like in a reverse viewing way, like people that kind of almost like a scene from behind the wall. So, and it's interesting to see like those spaces that kind of squeezing space in between those luggage, and people can see through it. And to me, and then like how the feeling of the luggage is kind of growing, expanding like towards the window frame, and then that kind of the pressure or the kind of pressure is kind of the way I want to ended up, you know, after having those like kind of do little Photoshop trick things on the picture. So, and I mean, connected to the current situation, it was all this pandemic thing, and also a lot of political elements in being involved in this situation. You know, the ban of the travel, and then now the current time is more talking about the immigration visa things going on with this current days. You know, like the immigration visa is, they are talking about like kind of ban the visa from the foreign students. So because they start like taking more online class, you know, instead of having physical class like in the fall, in the next spring. So there's all those things going on here. Those uncertainty and unstable, you know, the people like unsecure, like unsafe, the environment. I mean, that's kind of like feeling, and a lot of my work is dealing with the traveling during the immigration, and then I have that background as well, and I have a friend, I have a family in this, you know, they still dealing with this the whole immigration progress as well. So it's still ongoing, you know, keep on going like now and then. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a constantly evolving set of circumstances. We really are looking forward to seeing the work in person.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to back to Lee, who's got another question for the group. So Lee.
Thanks, Jed. So some of you may have already known each other before this series began, and under normal circumstances, we would have all gone out for drinks or dinner to celebrate your projects. But due to the current parameters, just seeing each other's installation may have been the only means of actual contact you've had with each other. So now, having all worked in the same space, and Long, I know you're coming up, could you share with us some of your impressions about each other's works that you saw there? And I'm hoping that this conversation goes the way of dinner and drinks, and we can all just kind of be very kind of observational and casual about it. I was lucky to be in the space with some of you for your installations, but like Sarita and Annalise, I didn't get to meet you. So I'm gonna jump this question to you first. Kind of, what were your impressions? Did you learn from past installations? That kind of question.
Well, so I'm in North Carolina, and so I experience a lot of things through images and text, a lot of y'all's work. And I was really struck very much with Leslie Martinez's work. And to really have, what was interesting was that having a moment like with the text that Leslie wrote, that was the memory that inspired this piece. I'm also from the Rio Grande Valley, and I just really enjoyed reading the memory, having those visualizations of the basketball hoop drilled to the plywood, attached to the mesquite tree, the dust, thinking about the colors of that space. It like really took me into a place in my brain and my body. And then to have that in contrast to the image of the work, and to have this pleasing experience of like those two things existing together in one space. And I had not really had that feeling before about experiencing artwork in a still image and through text in a long time. And so I really thoroughly enjoyed your installation, Leslie.
Annalise, what about you?
So I live downtown, and so my relationship with the Nasher Windows has been very, like I'm just like walking to see the pieces every week as they update. And so when the Black Lives Matters movement really started taking off in Dallas as in the form of protests, it was really powerful for me to go see Xavier's work or go and see it being covered with plywood, and then having it be revealed again for the second week. And I only know you, Xavier, through, I know you were alumni at SMU where I'm going to school right now. And so it was interesting to get to know you better through that work and through that experience.
I mean, speaking of SMU, I think there's a number of you who have either studied there or teach there. Tamara, you're teaching there now, and I think Xavier was your student. So any reflections that you have about how the series developed? I mean, going first would probably have felt a little daunting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is pretty SMU strong group, actually. But I think too, yeah, for me, I mean, what I loved about Catherine had connected Xavier and I on email saying like, you guys might not know each other, but Xavier is coming after you. So Xavier and I were able to kind of like make this like little funny, like, hey, look, we're going to be in these windows. But what I loved about it, Xavier's piece so much was it felt like there was like a weather inside the vestibule. It was like there was like a tornado inside there. And I just loved that sense of movement that came with these like kind of little extra pieces that he installed on the floor in conjunction with the hanging piece. And I don't know, it kind of felt like it was reverberating not only like itself, but also the climate of what was happening at that time during those first few weeks of the protests. And I don't know, it just kind of had this like, it was just like buzzing in there. And I really enjoyed that.
Xavier, that's two artists who've talked about your work.
Yeah.
What do you have? What do you want to say about what you've seen in the Nasher Windows so far?
I mean, it's really kind of a mini reunion. I am from Dallas, left to go to Stanford for my BFA, then came back here for my MFA. I know Leslie through MFA alumni, Travis or Tino Ward. I know who else? I know Tamara from classes. I met Annalise the like one time that I was back in town before doing this. I met Kristen prior to this. So it was kind of a mini reunion. And it's funny, the conversation that Tamara was talking about was one that we had maybe like a week later when she came by to visit. So it's nice to see the different responses to this space that are all ultimately very similar in speaking to things that are happening right now in the world. Yeah, it was fun short-lived project, you know, keep things moving around and keep things I really appreciate the Nasher for their initiative to respond in this moment, particularly when a lot of the institutions in the area aren't doing as much as they could, or, you know, like skating that line of, oh, we'll wait and see how things happen and blow over before, you know, it's a time for action, you know, and it's great to have an active space that is wanting to do something with it.
Yeah, for sure. And we're grateful to all of you artists who very quickly pulled things together for us. I mean, especially Tamara and Xavier going kind of the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was a really quick turnaround, and
Like
that's not always easy.
Yeah, it was like, oh, okay, like I wanted to like build, you know, I don't know, I wanted to like build a whole new building, you know, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
one week.
Jump, but you know.
But I will echo Xavier. I mean, I agree. Like, we've been seeing a lot of like kind of knee-jerk reactions to what's been happening, COVID, and you know, everything's kind of just like, oh, we're just going to do everything online, which, you know, is definitely, you know, a natural way of being. But like what Jeremy said in the very beginning, I mean, there is something about being able to go to a place and put your body in front of another object and like merge your molecules with an object. I mean, even though all these objects were behind glass, I still think there's so much value to that. And I just, you know, I am so grateful that the Nasher knew the value that what that is and what that means when you're able to kind of come into a place with an object is super, super important. But I will say maybe Kristen's does have the effect of escaping outside of the windows. It kind of bleeds onto you. It goes back inside and it comes out really, really far. So maybe hers is the one
It escaped the windows.
Yeah, it gets out. It like gets on everybody. Yeah, in a good way.
Kristen, what are your thoughts about what have you learned from past installations? What are your thoughts about past installations?
Just me?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I want to talk about every single one of them, but yeah, I mean, Tamara, I'm not just going back to you, but you were first. And so if I were to say one thing about all of them, I mean, it's like, it was a brilliant use of space, and I knew you already had this work conceived for Xovo, and so I was really excited about how slight it was, but how it emphasized, like it mapped the space in such a cool way, and that anyway. So that I thought was, and then the humor and the relationship to Brancusi and that dialogue and sort of this. You know, you're talking about, I don't know, sort of the regional nature of the imagery. I just think is, I like the way it has art historical references and, you know, references to this place that we're in here. And even just like base, ground, and whatever is up, you know, I can imagine it sort of like moving through the building in a really nice way. Leslie, I mean, like the way that Jed already said it, the way yours was pressed up against the glass and sort of the incredible chance related, you know, saturated color that comes from your process is just like totally luscious and wonderful, even though maybe, I don't know if, it's hard to say. I mean, the reflectivity was a challenge with every single one of them, but I think because yours has this optical like color patterning that relates to how light moves through trees and things and how the light was bouncing off the building, it might have been even more emphasizing like that transitional space. Like it felt very, very difficult to grasp, but satisfying if I could catch the surface texture, you know? Xavier, I loved that I had to go low. Like I was really drawn to the, that sort of provisional, like intact body and then fragmented, you know, landscape is kind of how I thought about it. And the movement was lovely. Yeah. And then thinking about, you know, Annalise and Sarita, just first, I, you know, it tipped me off to Phillida Barlow's work, who, you know, I just freaking love. And then I just loved hearing you all talk about it. And I like that this was really like an object in the round that just engaged that space in such a nice way. And I could imagine walking around it, even though I had to stay on the outside of it. And so I don't know if I've missed anyone, but I just loved having to decode work through this weird window reflection. And I don't know, it's really, really nice. So.
Thanks, Kristen. I mean, Leslie, you talked a little bit about how this work, Monarchs Are in the Hoop, was already this kind of transformational work that had to go through so many transformations. And I think even the day of install, when you came in, you were like, okay, I think I'm actually going to take it up, and you had to adapt because, there was damage to a window, so that screen had to come down. So just the way that you adapted that work is amazing. And I'm wondering if you had seen, the installations before, and that helped you kind of understand it, or what are your thoughts about how the series has overcome?
That's that's interesting. I had been able to see Tamara's project, and that's where I learned of the reflectivity. And the original plan for this piece was to sort of like not just like double stack it using the back glass, but like doing it in such a way that, I think right now, like, we're all sort of feeling sort of trapped in our homes and in the country, like in the state, like that sort of tension of the desire to like push out. And I initially envisioned this piece to be sort of more spread out through the space. Like two ideas that I respect both very equally is the idea of like stumbling upon something and having to sort of discover it and feeling like you witnessed something, and then this other idea of like direct frontality. And I wanted to originally like push everything out to like the corners and edges to like really get that idea of like the desire to escape, right, or being trapped within. But things just really changed, mostly based on the reflectivity. I personally liked the fact that with Tamara's piece, like I had to sort of find it, and that is always feels like kind of like just really nice and really fun, that it was sort of thin, but it was there, and its presence was like some other people have mentioned, like the idea that it's like penetrating all the way through the space on this axis. So when I saw her project, and also I think this goes sort of is part of my answer is actually like something to discuss later, but it wasn't my original intention to squeeze it up towards the front. That was a direct result of the conditions of light, wanting it to be a little bit more visible, I guess.
Yeah. And then Long, you have the luxury of time and seeing all of these installations before you install yours next week. So I'm curious, have you been able to go down to the Nasher at any moment to see any of the installations and any impressions or reactions you may have to what has come before you, and if that has had any effect or impact on your own thinking?
Yeah, I mean, first, I really appreciate like everyone has been, like in the test pool like before me. At first, I got the invitation from Lee again. Like, I was getting a little bit nervous and was like, okay, because like, I was kind of like busy at the time, like May or June, and I was like requesting like see if I can put it in the middle. And I appreciate that all the timing that you give me, and then everyone has been involved in this project already, and I get to see like everyone's work online, and then as well as the I get to see in person with Sarita and Leslie's work, and Ananis and Sarita's work in person. So I know Sarita and Ananis back in UNT, we went to a UNT together, right? And then it's a UNT, right? So yeah, so this work, I mean, I really like enjoy viewing it as a sculpture installation, and with this whole series of the window series of display, and we're talking about the two space, two word, like the one word inside a window and one word outside a window, like there's a viewer, and there's a two space of communicating, and it's kind of like having a connection to the certain entities, like the sculpture with a two like rock stone, and then having the connection, the two connection to it, and now this whole pandemic thing is talking about the communication, it's talking about the connection, the cooperation between the different world, different country. So I think there's, deliver a very strong message to it. And also the Kristen's work, I love it. I just love it. It communicated again between the inner space and the exterior space as well. The light is, the strong light glowing. It's no matter the daytime and nighttime, it displays very well. And when you are there, you just feel like you're in it. You're in this whole space, and like you've been touched with this lighting, and then you're fitting in, and you feel you're part of it. You're part of this world. You're part of this the whole situation going on, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Long.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague, Catherine, for kind of the last question, which I think is a very, very loaded one. So there you go,
Thanks,
Catherine.
All right. Everybody relax. It's okay. I want to start this, since we've just been talking about spectatorship and everybody looking at each other's windows, by just quickly explaining kind of how this gets carried out, because it's quite extraordinary, and because I have, for the most part, myself witnessed this more from a distance. Each artist each week comes to the Nasher and is met by one of us, one of the curators, and they enter the vestibule and install with wearing masks and gloves, with the help of our amazing facilities team, particularly Chris Bosco. I want to give out a shout out to him, but also to my colleagues, because when we started all of this, I was in New York, and so I worked on we each kind of matched up, each curator worked with an individual artist, and I wasn't able to be on site for Xavier's installation. Lee and Jed very kindly did so, and when I came back to Dallas a couple of weeks ago, I was self-quarantining, so I came by the Nasher and waved at Annalise during installation, and Jed kindly also looked after her and made sure everything was okay. And then Kristen, I was able to come by and stay back a good distance and kind of shout things at her, positive things, I hope. So all of that's just to say that there's a kind of amazing, the nice part is that I think all the installations look rather effortless and inevitable, and as if they couldn't be any other way, in a sense. But there's been a lot of hard work behind the scenes, and I really appreciate my team who've been stepping in and doing that. My question, when we began this series back in May and invited all of you for your proposals, we had only, and I say only, a global pandemic to deal with. And we still have it to deal with much worse now, apparently. But in the time since you all made your proposals, one momentous thing after another has come to pass. Most spectacularly, perhaps the murder of George Floyd and the initiation of Black Lives Matter protests. But add to that the Supreme Court's decision to block the Trump administration's attempt to end DACA, the court's inclusion of LGBTQ persons under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, protecting them from discrimination, except now we see not in every case, or at least as the latest judgments from the Supreme Court have come down. Any one of these events is so momentous that I think we're all still processing this. At the same time, it's only been a couple of months and all of you pretty much executed the projects that you proposed to us. So I'm just wondering what you see about this time and about your work when you impact this kind of time capsule. I wonder if you see something in your work that you didn't see before, or if it just kind of reinforces and encourages something, that an interest you've already had, or a conviction, or points in a new path for you. Or it could be that you're still processing, which is perfectly sane and fine. I think, Xavier, if it's all right, I might like to toss it to you first, just because your work was on you when all these events began to accelerate. I think the first of the Black Lives Matter protests began maybe even the Friday, the day that your installation opened.
Yeah, I think that's right. And at least for me, it'll still ring as one of the worst weeks that I've had in my life. Like, it was the week I found out that my wife killed herself. I had another great collaborator, Lucky Peterson, pass away. I had another friend who lost her father. And all these things combining in the middle of a momentous moment doesn't change those things from happening. And I think that's really a lot of the energy that needs to continue on, is that, like, though we have these victories or moments of recognition, happiness, joy, but like there's still a lot of work to be done in the midst of all this, and preserving ourselves and our life's work is really the more important thing than what kind of sponsorship or recognition we can get out of something. I don't know. I don't know if anything particular is going to change in my work because of this. Like, again, this was kind of a reunion for me. I'm happy to be from Dallas, though it frustrates me most of the time. That I was in Dallas at this moment, and quarantining was a synchronicity that, spelled the end of a number of things, and at least as of now, not the beginning of anything else inside of the city, Like, I haven't had any major things reach out to me, or anything progress in that kind of vein, but it's still affirming that, my work still stands up. I can put it in a place, and it hits, and I can be around my peers in a way that is meaningful. So, I just hope it all keeps going. That's all. I don't know.
Yeah, that's that's more than enough. And I mean, first of all, I'm just thanks for sharing all that, and I'm just really sorry about or to hear about the losses that you've endured, especially that week. Some I knew about and some I didn't, and I think that's also one of the really challenging things right now is how to deal with loss and with mourning when there's so many of these avenues or options close to us. And
Yeah, grief
Kristen,
is
that's
generally
actually something. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say grief
Go
is like
ahead.
a communal thing in that way, you know, and to have communities reduced to strictly being indoors, our communities essentially again having to be forced to fight for their humanity is just another really telling thing about what this moment is about and how we can overcome those type of things.
Right. Kristen, oh yes, I'm sorry. Right now I'm
It's all
not
right.
saying
It's
my
Jed.
name. Hi, Jed.
It's Jed. I just wanted to interject really quickly. One of the things that struck me most about this series is how the series really resonated with the moment in that these works were separated from us by the glass. And there was always that tension there of wanting to connect, but not being able to connect. But moreover, all of the works seem to evince a kind of vulnerability, the works themselves, and to speak to the vulnerability that we all feel. And it seemed to me, each work would express a broad humanity in the most beautiful way. And I don't know if that is a result of just the times that we're living in, but I think maybe more likely is that we're all responding to these tidal waves of events as human beings, and in seeing, I think, how vulnerable we all are in these moments. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make that comment. I'm sure others have much more to say.
Yeah, and I mean it's I think it's also this moment where we see kind of the limitations of the technology, because it's ordinarily it would be easier to catch kind of visual cues from people or see the, so just I'm going to ask Kristen about her work because I think it has some bearing on what we're talking about. But if anybody else would like to say something, just cut on in, because I don't think I can see you otherwise.
Well, yeah, I mean, it feels like, what do you say? What do you say with everything that's been going on? The work, this farewell work, I think it might have been mentioned in one of the bits of text, it relates to a work that I made some years ago where I was kind of thinking about this word farewell and breaking it up. And it came back into my mind in part because, I'm trying to update a website. It's just like a really basic reason, but in the current climate, I was thinking about this word again. And so, it's what other people have already talked about, so many, I think when I originally proposed the idea, it was pre-protests. And so the most pressing thing on my mind and on, I think a lot of people's minds and sort of their felt experience was this feeling of being sort of, at least for me, like stuck, static, contained, sort of unable to move freely, and receiving all of this messaging through media, social media, through like glowing boxes that, this ghost, this sort of ghost virus is affecting the world in this particular way. And so the farewell work was proposed a lot with that in mind, but also with the passing of Donald Fowler, who I knew, who I loved and was encouraged by in the way that he did with every single person he met, I would dare say. And so it was sort of this layering of the current global crisis, and whether personally affected, everyone's affected, but to what degree everyone is experiencing losses, whether it's witnessing them at a distance and having to absorb that information however you can, or managing the grief that might be really personal. That was very much on my mind, acknowledging loss sort of on a universal, whether it's of the moment, it is of the moment, but generally like recognizing loss and the passage of time, which has been a part of my work for a while in materially very different ways. And then being able to, and for everybody here, how ideas come to you. And it was just like, okay, I'm so sad that Donald is passed, and I was able to sort of connect something very specific and personal with something that was affecting people generally. And I don't really know what else to say, but that's sort of how the work came together and seemed to relate to now. But I think always, like, I was concerned, and I think I talked to Catherine about this, that after, this work was proposed, and then, and then we see these graphic, murders, and people are protesting in the streets, and it's so active, right? And there's outrage. And I was concerned that the work would be too light, too like, oh, that's sweet, but how are we supposed to farewell right now? Like, what does that even mean? Like, and because it's incredibly difficult. So as I've been thinking about it, I think you've used the word benediction, Catherine, and in a way, I think I wanted the work to have the tension of loss and the present, like absence and presence, and like grappling with that, and that it could be a message to be received, instead of, I've got a farewell, this sign is telling me to farewell, and I don't know how to do that because everything's terrible, but that if it could just be received as a passive sort of washing over, then, I know that that's very mystical and magical, and an art object is just an object, but if it could do that in any possible way, that's what my imagined sort of hope was. And to honor Donald, to really think about him as, people don't have to know that story to engage with this, but for me, it felt like the right thing to do.
Thank you, Kristen. Leslie, I wonder about your work, and since it was made for another occasion that already existed, have you had different thoughts about it since having it on view? And
yeah, absolutely. So there was sort of a moment sort of right after the sort of aspect of the moment after George Floyd died, in which there was a lot of fire and destruction, right? And I sort of am a person who understands what that kind of rage is about, and it's not something that I analyzed in this way that was like, you know, why are they doing that? And sort of my anger at sort of that perspective of that sort of perspective against the manifestation of rage that can come in the form of destruction, had me look at my project differently, in the sense that they were already in these colors that are of fire and ash and just burnt. And I felt sort of like, you know, maybe worried that it could be perceived as extremely political, even though that's what my work always is. It is extremely political. I changed, you know, my sense of the orientation of my project from that initial sort of like queer moth type of find me into something that felt more present, like frontality. Actually, it wasn't just about observing the space in the daytime and the glare. It really was also like, don't make something that has to be found, like push it forward in a way that, you know, really speaks to the idea that certain aspects of society that many of us who are artists and who are sensitive and, you know, people of color understand in a much more frontal way than others. It just said, you know what, like, it's not the time right now to be coy. Like, you actually do want to be out there. You know, I'm somebody who, you know, who is trans, who is transitioning, who is like pissed off about the way things are, you know, like, I hate the fact that people are in pain. I understand the pain. Like, I want that to end. So to a degree, like, immediately after that happened, my whole vision for the project changed, but I wanted it to be within a line. So in a line in which the darker elements were sort of in the center, that could look like a horizon that is sort of like already been through the process of flame or inflamed, and then everything else sort of radiating from that line. But, you know, I couldn't, because that glass was broken. And so I, you know, personally had wanted that glass to be revealed, but I also understood that it couldn't. And this idea of like the work having to sort of like climb over it sort of just became interesting to me. And it, you know, I didn't get to fuss over this installation either. I just made initial decisions and said, you're just gonna have to go with what it looks like. And that to me is, you know, somehow sort of related to that felt like sort of political need in my heart to push the work up to the front.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Thanks very much. That's great. I mean, that's really interesting. I had wondered about the pushing up the in front of the glass. I've gotten a message that we're almost out of time, but I want to give the couple of you that haven't spoken a chance also to respond to this question. Annalise and Sarita, I think in your maybe in some exchanges I've had with you, or maybe even the audio clips that you recorded, you were already seeing some ways in which you were changing the way you thought about the work that you showed. And I wonder if you could briefly talk about that with us.
So showing at the Nasher was like a very raw experience for me. It was very emotional time, and being in an exhibition space was kind of, it was heavy, you know. It was a heavy time to put yourself in an exhibition space and be vulnerable to, you know, whatever anyone has to think about it. So I think that when I think about the work that we showed, Orbital Migration 3000, and the fact that it's modular, it can be adjusted. It often is. This is the 3000 version of orbital migration. I think a lot about the piece emphasizes connection, and a connection, this portal that connects two spaces that are divided by a river, a border. But then I also think a lot about, even though that connection is important, and it's important to talk about that because a lot of people don't realize that exists in the border region between people and their families. I think that I'm wondering if like the work needs to be pushed so that the struggles for equality that people are going through in this area, like the migrants, the people in the ICE detentions, need to be brought a little more to the forefront in a fine arts setting, so that these marginalized people are not ignored, and that these conversations are happening in the art world as well.
That was awesome. I wanted to add, it was really challenging to show this work, and as we got closer and closer to the installation date, I personally, and Annalise and I had conversations about just our voices at this very moment and important to share. And that was challenging to think about that, and in the end, through conversations together, you know, the issues of immigration for us and for a lot of people in our country are important and should be brought to the conversation. And so we felt secure in that. And as we continue talking, I think one of the things personally when I look at this piece, it really emphasizes duality, and that's like a feeling that can be impacted onto somebody who is a border citizen, is that you're really thinking about the spaces of two, or thinking in two and split. And as we continue working together, and in my own individual work, I'm really interested in incorporating, like, visualizing multiple perspectives, and working outside of that duality. And I think that there will be power in that.
I think so too. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe to end with a bookend, our first and our, for now, final artists. Tamara, you had to go first, and I wonder if you've had maybe the luxury of reflection, or if you have any thoughts looking back at the work at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I see everybody's faces in their Zoom rectangles, and it's been an interesting couple of months. But I think for me, I've really reflected more on my piece and thinking about who penetrates and who receives. And when that happens, it's not comfortable and it hurts. And like Jed said, you know, we've been throwing around this word vulnerable. I think to the credit of a lot of the curators, all the projects that have been shown, and Long Louise, who's yet to be shown, they all do this. They all show this like underbelly of things that aren't beautiful and aren't pretty and that hurt and that feel bad. My natural state is crying, so this is actually like how I normally am all the time. but yeah, I think it's just, you know, I can't get over this idea of, you know, when two things meet, you know, what happens at that moment. And it can be very powerful. It can be really loud and it can be really quiet, and it can be a match, you know, that starts a whole fire. So I think that, you know, I look at all the projects that have been in these windows and they're all like starting fires in, you know, different ways. And I think, you know, when we make art, we do it for each other. You know, I think we try to, or at least I know, we try to impress our peers first. You know, and that's where the good, happy joy that Xavier talked about, the competition that fuels us and motivates us, comes from, you know, impressing each other. And, you know, I feel that in this group of artists, and it feels good. And so that's a small victory, to have something that feels positive.
And Long, you're yet to come, but do you have any thoughts at this point?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very unique time, and then very unique opportunity, like for us to look at this Windows series. I assume like there's not like 100 people pile up in front of a window and look at it, right? So normally, like I would say, like one at a time, especially during this time and the downtown, like the museum area is closed. I assume like one people at a time. This is pretty private space for people looking at the art, unlike normally like, you know, like people surround you and then, you know, look at work together. And I think I do enjoy that kind of peace and, you know, that quiet time for you to think about the work, and for the audience thinking about work, and then for audience to think about the current situation and what they are facing and what's going on their own life, on this whole entire things going on. And also the white luggage, and there's always people asking me, you know, why it has to be painted on white. Initially, that was implying to the people traveling from city to city, people like immigrating from country to country. They want to refresh and then their life, and then restart a new life, and sometimes it's just like a blank paper, restart again. And I hope like this kind of white meaning that from my luggage, that can somehow give us the message that after this whole thing's going on, things is not going back to the exact normal as what we were after this situation. Just like teaching, some of us are teaching, like the way is teaching is not going to be the exact same as a spring, right? That in this past spring, things have changed, but I hope like our new opportunity, our new life, our new challenge would be it would become very well, yeah, like in the future. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Long, and thanks to all of you for the art you've given us, and also for your honesty and sharing yourselves with us this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren, who I think has some questions from our audience.
So we're a few minutes over, but it felt like the conversation was really kind of flowing, and I didn't want to wrap things up early. We have one main question that we've gotten from Rose and Jeff. They are asking if there's going to be any opportunity in the future to view these works. They live outside of the Dallas Central, and they haven't been able to see the works in person, and they're hoping that they have the opportunity to, I'm sure, especially after this really awesome conversation.
Is Jeremy still on the call? I
Yes,
think we would all love that. I think I always thought of this series as a beginning of something, and I never like to say that, you know, Longs is the last installation, because I have great hope that it may continue in some form or another. Whether that happens off-site, closer to where Rose and Jeff are, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's always been my hope that it could continue even after we reopen. So, you know, in a year or whenever this pandemic lessens its impact and allows us to kind of move about more freely and open up the Nasher, hopefully, you know, Rose and Jeff, you'll have an opportunity to come down.
If anybody else has a question, I'll let us go for just 1 more minute or so. I don't think we have any other questions at the moment, but thank you all so much for taking the time tonight to come and talk about your work and for being so vulnerable with all of us. I really appreciate each and every one of you, and I look forward to seeing what work you have coming in the future. So I guess we'll go ahead and leave it there and sign off for the night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll email out the recording as soon as it's on YouTube.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Hugs.
Thank you.
Thank you. So great to speak with all of you.
Bye.
Yeah, great to see you too. Bye-bye.